Welcome back to The Mindful Hunter. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. And today we are going to be comparing the Sitka Ambient Hoody against the Sitka Core Heavyweight Hoody. Now, full disclosure, Sitka does give me gear. So I got these two pieces for free. I have no financial arrangement with them whatsoever. They have zero editorial control over this review. They've never asked me, to sway my opinion one way or another or anything even remotely like that. So for full transparency's sake, I want you to know that I got this gear for free, but I am reviewing it exactly like I would any other gear. A quick note about my reviews community, just for those of you who are new to the channel. If you want to belong to a community that's focused on gear information, sharing tips about gear, getting, feedback on purchases and what your next piece of gear should be, I highly recommend you join Mindful Reviews. It's mindful-reviews.com. Link is below in the description. Very low fee to join. Not only do you get all the stuff I already mentioned, you also get to participate in raffles that I have for gear after I'm done reviewing it, and you get to help choose what pieces of gear I review next. And in addition to that, all lifetime members are entered into a draw to win a kick-ass prize every month. The prize last month was a GoPro Hero 11 Black full kit, and the prize this coming month will be a slick 634 tripod paired with a Wiser Precision Nighthawk PH170 pan head. And you'll get the whole unit, pan head, tripod, whole 9 yards. And the only thing you have to do to be entered is to be a lifetime member, either currently or buy a new lifetime membership between now and the end of the month. That's it for the shameless plug. If you want any more information, feel free to drop a comment below or shoot me a DM on Instagram at mindful_hunter. Now, as always, I try and keep my reviews as objective and unbiased as possible. However, we are all victims to emotionally based psychological marketing. We all have tribes that we feel like we belong to. And sometimes people feel like I'm saying shitty stuff about the companies that they care about. So all I would ask you to do is to remain objective as possible while watching this review. My only goal is to try and share information to help you make better gear purchases. I personally don't care what company you buy your gear from or what companies you support. That's not my job. My job is to objectively analyze gear and tell you guys what my findings are. Also, as always, remember, all of this is my personal opinion. Now, some of it is more factual than other parts because I'm able to measure things or quantify things and it's less opinion and more fact. But at the end of the day, gear is hyper personalized. So just because it works for me doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And just because something doesn't work for me doesn't mean that you might not be more than happy with that particular piece of gear. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. And at the end of the day, going and trying shit on for yourself is always the best bet. Now, like I said, we're looking at the Sitka Ambient Hoody and the Core Heavyweight Hoody. I think it might benefit us to take a moment and describe where those pieces sit in the hierarchy of clothing. Both those pieces are considered dynamic insulation. So we have dynamic insulation and we have static insulation. If you're curious about my own layering system, I've got a video called The 7 Pieces of Clothing You Need for a Sheep Hunt or something like that. It can really be applied to all hunts. And basically I go through the different layers and then give you some examples of different pieces from different companies that would fit those layers. But any layering system is going to be comprised of the same layers. They're going to serve the same function, but you can insert different products into those layers depending on your own body type, your own allegiances to different companies, your own preference for camo. I mean, all kinds of stuff. So essentially what we are doing is comparing two pieces of dynamic insulation. Now we have dynamic insulation and static insulation. Dynamic insulation is meant to be worn on top of a base layer, potentially under an outer shell, like a rain jacket or a soft shell, but not necessarily. It could be your last layer of defense. And it's meant to be used while doing stuff, while hiking, while glassing, while moving, all kinds of stuff. Now, static insulation is meant to be put on when we stop. So yes, while dynamic insulation can be worn while glassing, it's more common to put an additional piece of static insulation on once you stop. You rarely hike with static insulation on unless it's extremely cold. Just because I'm reviewing these two pieces from Sitka, I don't want you to think that I'm saying only these two pieces provide these particular benefits or features. You can get very similar pieces to these two pieces from other companies. So let's break it down one more notch. On one hand, we have a grid fleece piece. This is a classic layer of dynamic insulation. Almost every single apparel company, whether it be mountaineering or hunting, has a grid fleece. And some in multiple weights, from light to medium to heavyweight grid fleece. It's a very classic piece, and it's worked very well for many people for many years for lots of very good reasons. Now, the other piece is a more technologically advanced piece that has actual synthetic insulation built into the shell itself. Now, one of the interesting things they've done with the Ambient is that historically, a piece like this would be 3 layers. You would have an outer shell, an inner shell, and the insulation in between. What they've been able to do with the Ambient Hoody is ditch the inner shell and turn the insulation into that inner shell. So they've been able to reduce weight and increase breathability. Now I'm going to get into the specs later on, but I want you to remember that these pieces are meant to keep you warm while being breathable and offering a certain amount of durability and breathability and packability. And how much of each of those vectors kind of depends upon the piece and what your individual needs are. But I want to state very clearly, neither of these are like heavily rainproof. You know, if it starts pissing rain, you're getting soaking wet in both of these. So they're not meant for like a durable outer shell. They have a durable water repellence on the layer on the Ambient, and fleece has its own kind of weather resistant properties. So, you know, mild, misty, drizzly, showery type of stuff, you're going to be fine in these pieces, but not the pieces you're going to want to wear in a downpour. And finally, the way these two pieces are built, as I said, they're meant to be layered on top of a base layer and potentially underneath an outer shell. But I've also used them in combination before. And in fact, I have layered the Core Heavyweight Hoody underneath the Ambient Hoody in extremely cold circumstances while hunting whitetail last November in Alberta. Now, I personally would not do it the other way around. The Core Heavyweight Hoody has more of a performance fit, and the Ambient is more of a standard fit. So it's not quite as form-fitting. So it just makes a lot more sense to put the Heavyweight Hoody underneath the Ambient Hoody. Okay, that's kind of a brief overview. Now, I looked at price, weight, fabrics, a general overview, and the weather resistance. And I'm going to say right now, I am not going to tell you unequivocally one of these is better than the other. Buy this one, not that one. These pieces are both priced significantly different and function significantly different enough that I think it's a more nuanced answer. Now, I have my opinion about which one I would own if I could only have one, but that depends upon factors that are important to me. So I'm going to walk through all these categories. I'm going to describe to you how I think they behave in those categories, and then I will give you some feedback as to which piece might be best suited for your individual needs. So for price, the Core Heavyweight Hoody comes in at $159 US, and the Sitka Ambient Hoody comes in at $279 US. So let's just pump the brakes. It's essentially $160 for the Heavyweight Hoody and $280 for the Ambient Hoody. Now, that is a drastic price difference. And I'm going to tell you right now, that's kind of what's at the base of me not being able to say one is better than the other. Because in most technical categories, the Ambient outperforms. I didn't actually know what this piece cost at first. I got it, I tried it, I fell in love with it. I started recommending it to people, and I was getting these emails back like, are you on crack? You want me to pay $300 for, what I used to be able to get for $100 to $150 for a grid fleece layer. Like, you want me to replace my $100 to $150 layer with a $300 layer. So I'm going to go right out on a limb right now and say that if budget is your ultimate concern, the Ambient is not for you. You probably want to look at a grid fleece piece, and you want to look at the Core Heavyweight Hoody. As far as weight goes, the Ambient comes in at 13 ounces and the Core Heavyweight comes in at 14.8 ounces, so almost 3 ounces heavier. Now, both of those are for a size large. So I wear a double XL in both of these pieces. So if you take a larger size, obviously the garment that shows up is going to weigh more than this. But apples to apples, the Heavyweight weighs about 3 ounces more in the large size. Okay, so let's talk fabrics now. So with the Ambient, we have a 20D shell on the exterior. That's 4-way stretch nylon. And then we have 100 grams of synthetic insulation. And this is a Primaloft product. And then there's a DWR finish on the outer shell. Now the Core Heavyweight is made of comfort stretch fleece. This is 93% polyester and 7% elastane. Let's break down kind of the overview of the performance of these two pieces. And we're going to use the little charts that Sitka puts up on their website. And then I'm going to tell you where I agree with these charts and where I disagree with these charts. So a couple other notes about the Ambient. If anybody has ever run the Kelvin Active jacket from Sitka, this is like an improved version of that jacket. That jacket was a 3-layer construction. That jacket did not have a hood. There was a couple other factors about that jacket that I wasn't a huge fan of. I loved the piece, but it kind of fell apart for me in a couple categories that were really important. And I feel with the Ambient Hoody, what they've done is taken all the flaws that the Kelvin Active jacket had and erased them and kind of gave us this souped up version of the Kelvin Active jacket in a much better performing piece of gear. Now, as I mentioned before, the insulation is from Primaloft and it's called Evolve Active Insulation. I'm sure it is some similar, gel-like threaded material like most synthetic insulations are these days. I didn't do a deep dive into the actual construction process, but I've used this extensively and the warmth to weight ratio is super impressive. Okay, so if we look at the ranking that Sitka gives this garment, it gets a 4 out of 5 on breathability, a 4 out of 5 on moisture wicking, a 3 out of 5 on warmth, a 2 out of 5 on durability, and a 4 out of 5 on packability. Now, if we go over to the Core Heavyweight fleece, it gets a 4 out of 5 on breathability, a 5 out of 5 on moisture wicking, a 3 out of 5 on warmth, and a 3 out of 5 on durability. It doesn't have a packability rating. I would probably give it a 3 out of 5 on packability. It's not that it's a particularly large piece, it's just that it doesn't compress. The piece, because it's a fleece, it's only gonna get as small as it gets. The thing about an insulation piece is that when it's unpacked, it's larger and you can squish it down into a smaller size because there's a bunch of air in there. There's no air in the fleece. The fabric is what the fabric is. It would compress down the same as a t-shirt would compress down. What don't I like about these two ratings? For starters, they've got them both ranked at a 4 out of 5 on breathability, and I have to disagree on that. Part of the magic of the Ambient for me is that it offers you a modicum of wind protection while still being extremely breathable. So one of the things that I notice about the Core Heavyweight Hoody is that while it's breathable, if a stiff breeze comes up while you're walking, I feel like the breeze blows right through the fleece and I can get pretty cold pretty quickly. Now this is nice because it obviously proves that it's breathable, but in an ideal situation, breathability should let you evacuate moisture from the inside and repel moisture from the outside, or allow air to move from the inside to the outside and not allow air to move from the outside to the inside. Like when you look at Gore-Tex or really advanced materials, they're layered in a way that only allows one direction of travel for moisture and air. Fleece is not a particularly technologically evolved fabric. And it's not going to be able to unidirectionally, influence the travel of air and moisture. It's just going to go back and forth equally. So in that sense, to me, the Ambient has a higher breathability ranking than the Core Heavyweight. And more important than that, the Ambient dries quicker. I've worn these both under very similar circumstances. And that's why here they give a higher moisture wicking rating to the Heavyweight fleece. And I disagree with that a little bit. What I do agree with is that because the fleece is a performance fit and it's tighter to your body, it is going to physically grab that sweat and start to pull it to the outside of the garment. Whereas the Ambient hoodie is a bit looser of a feeling. So your sweat is going to need to evaporate and then pass as vapor through the barrier. So I guess if that's how you're defining moisture wicking, I would say that the Core Heavyweight fleece is superior. However, if we're talking about you're soaking wet, you have this garment on, which garment evacuates moisture quicker and gets you and the garment dry quicker? It's the Ambient, hands down. I think the synthetic insulation, I think the air pockets, I think the difference between having a separation between the internal insulation and the exterior shell, all that stuff combines to give this like a really powerful kind of wicking drying property that is definitely superior to the Core Heavyweight. Now again, they've given them a tie on warmth. 3 out of 5 for the Ambient and 3 out of 5 for the Core Heavyweight. And I would disagree. I would bump that up to 4 for the Ambient and I would leave it at 3 for the Heavyweight fleece. Now the reason that I would do this is that ability to stop the wind and just the very nature of the insulation itself. Again, I tested the shit out of both of these products under very similar circumstances, sometimes going back and forth in the same day. And the Ambient hoodie is significantly warmer, especially when you introduce a moderate wind, than the Heavyweight fleece is. Now, if you were to put on a shell, like let's say a light rain jacket, like the Dew Point, I think those warmth ratings start to equal out a little bit, because what the fleece lacks the ability to do is to protect heat from being pulled away from your body by, exterior wind. And I think the Ambient does a particularly good job of that. Durability, I do think they have this right. The Ambient is not as durable as the Heavyweight fleece. Now, one of the things about the Ambient is that exterior nylon shell, while it has a bit of stretch and it's a 20D, does have the ability to fold and crinkle. And if you're walking through brush, there's any kinds of like twigs, branches, or little thorns, it is going to get caught on stuff and it is more prone to rip than the fleece. Now, because of the fleece's single layer construction, being that the micro fleece is backed directly onto the outer shell, it's not going to be able to fold over nearly as tightly. And so it's more likely to stay flat and less likely to grab onto things. And just having worn them both, the Heavyweight fleece is definitely more durable than the Sitka Ambient. As far as weather resistance goes, I would say both of these items tie. Like I said earlier, they're not hyper weather resistant. There's a light DWR coating on the Sitka Ambient, and the fleece itself, because it's made of synthetic material, does naturally repel a light kind of rain or mist fairly well. But these are not pieces that are going to give you a large degree of weather protection. Now, the one thing I did notice, because I was like soaked to the bone in both of these pieces multiple times, they both still retain quite a bit of heat when wet, which is great. And they both dried out reasonably well once I put on a puffy layer. So if I got caught in the rain and I got to my glassing spot and I chucked on a puffy layer, within an hour or two, both were dry enough that they were no longer uncomfortable. And anytime I had to go to bed with them on in order to dry them out, 2 or 3 hours in a synthetic sleeping bag, and these pieces were bone dry. But again, under both drying conditions, the Sitka Ambient outperformed the Core Heavyweight in that it got drier faster with nothing but my body heat to evacuate the moisture. And again, both systems by using a synthetic puffy jacket or a synthetic sleeping bag, you're really expediting that process. I think a lot of people get to a glassing knob and they want to sit there for a minute thinking like the sweat is going to come out of their body and evaporate. And that's not what happens unless it's incredibly warm outside. And most of the time we're hunting shoulder seasons and it's pretty cool. And when it's cool like that, the moisture just doesn't move. And that's why you have to put on, a static insulation layer to kind of increase the level of heat. And then that creates a differential in pressure. And then the moisture is forced to be evacuated from the garment and they dry out. Okay, so before we get into my final recommendations, let's take a look at how both these garments fit me. Okay, so I'm 6'1" and I'm currently 241 pounds. Now, the reason I mention that is that I'm preparing for a bodybuilding competition right now. And 3 weeks ago, I was 260 pounds. And probably 6 weeks from now, I will be 215 pounds. So the size and shape I am right now is pretty critical into assessing how both of these garments fit. So in order to provide a level playing field, I'm going to wear the Sitka Core Lightweight Short Sleeve underneath. Now, for late season hunting, I used to always wear the Core Lightweight Hoodie. And then since moving to both of these pieces, I more often than not wear this short sleeve shirt because these do such a good job of keeping my arms warm. I found having 2 layers from the elbow down was just useless. And because both these pieces have a hood, I didn't need the lightweight hood that comes on the Core Lightweight Hoodie. Now, if I was summer sheep hunting, I think, or real early season elk hunting, when I was going to be in my base layer most of the day, then I would go back to the Core Lightweight Hoodie because I like the arm protection when I'm going through the bush. And I like having the hood, especially with like the ninja face mask when we get into like calling elk and doing other stuff. But just to give you an idea, this is how these pieces fit on my body with this underlayer. So here is the Core Heavyweight Hoodie in size XXL. I basically take XXL in everything that comes from Sitka, especially up top. It's the biggest size they make. There's dudes bigger than I am wearing Sitka, and I don't really know what sizes they're wearing. Maybe it's because I care a lot in my size through the chest and my upper arms and shoulders, and this is where it tends to get tight on me. And then down here, it's like a friggin' tent. And I feel it's built for guys that, might be a little bigger down here and not quite as athletic. I will say the Core Heavyweight Hoodie, while it's a performance fit, tends to fit a little larger than the lightweight hoodie. I find the lightweight hoodie a little undersized. And it's almost too tight on my arms, which is another reason why I'm moving more to the short sleeve base layer underneath. But it's snug enough that I can wear a puffy jacket over top. I really like the length. One of the things that bugs me, especially about hunting apparel, is when people skimp out on the length. When it starts getting too short and then you put your backpack on and then it kind of like rides up the back and you can feel your hip belt kind of riding on bare skin. I hate that. So I would much prefer, especially with a mid layer like this, that it be a little longer than too short. So other than being a little bit baggy through the midsection, like it almost makes me want to try and get away with an extra large tall, but I know an extra large tall won't fit me across the chest and the shoulders. But if you were my height and weight, 6'1" and 240, but you weren't quite as athletically built or as broad along the top, I might recommend an XL because otherwise it's going to be a little bit too roomy for you. But here's the fit. Really nice hood. I've always been a fan of Sitka's hood. They've kind of got the tri-panel construction, so it doesn't come down over your eyes too much. There's no extra like drawstring or any way to articulate this hood. And then you kind of get almost full face protection. So this is great for the winter. Covers the vast majority of your face. So there you go. Sitka Core Heavyweight Hoodie in XXL. So here is the Sitka Ambient Hoody, again in double XL. And a couple of things are gonna jump out at you right away. Number one, even though the Core Heavyweight Hoody is described as a performance fit, and this is described as a standard fit, there is almost more of an athletic fit to this piece than that piece, which is why I was saying earlier, I think the Heavyweight Hoody, the way they've measured it or built it is actually, it's oversized slightly. Sleeves, to be quite honest with you, could be an extra half an inch or an inch long. I liked that the Heavyweight came down a little bit lower. Again, 6'1", 240, and I tend to be like all arms and legs. Like I have long arms. Finding clothes that fit my arms is harder than finding clothes that fit my body. So also, this is not as long. I have maybe 4 inches from my belt line, where I think I had more like 6. So I do think the Heavyweight the Heavyweight Hoody might get a bit of an edge in that area. Again, I do like that this one has a slimmer fit through the midsection. It's not as baggy. And again, same tri-panel hood construction, really nice and fitted. Doesn't fall on top of your eyes. I've worn these under toques. I've worn toques underneath these. Really versatile. I like the 3/4 length zip. This was one of my problems with the Kelvin Active jacket. I don't think you need a whole jacket. Like being able to zip from here down doesn't really add any versatility. You can cool down and evacuate moisture with a half zip. You don't need the full length zip, and you're saving the extra weight of the zipper, and you're saving the extra bulk. Like things tend to fold weird and compress weird when you start putting hip belts over zippers. So I much prefer the half zip. So one more time, 6'1", 240 pounds, Sitka Ambient Hoody in size double XL. Okay, so bottom line, what do I think you should do? Or what do I do myself? If money is not a barrier, the Sitka Ambient is superior in almost every single way. And if I was only gonna own one of these pieces and price didn't matter, it would be the Sitka Ambient all day. Now, I quite like owning both pieces because I still think there are some hunts where the Heavyweight Hoody really shines. And again, in those really cold winter situations, being able to layer these two on top of each other. So what I did when I was whitetail hunting is I wore this as my base layer, then the Core Heavyweight Hoody, then the Ambient Hoody, then I actually wore the Fanatic jacket, which is like this crazy Berber fleece, super frickin' warm thing. And it sounds like a lot, but I was still hypermobile. It was an archery hunt. I could still pull back my bow, no problem. And adding that second layer of dynamic insulation really increased my comfort level. Like I was sitting out on a stand for 6-7 hours in a row at, minus 20, minus 25 Celsius, minus 10 Fahrenheit. And the only thing that was really holding me back was my feet. And I've got into that on previous podcasts, and I have a solution for that moving forward. But my upper body and my core was warm as could be. So if budget is the determining factor for you, I don't think like the Sitka Ambient blows the Heavyweight Hoody out of the water. Like it's not like the Heavyweight Hoody is now just obsolete because of how good the Sitka Ambient is. If I was going to put a number to it, I'd probably say 15%. I'd probably say the Ambient Hoody from a functional, technical perspective is about 15 to 20% better than the Core Heavyweight Hoody. But it's significantly more expensive than 15 or 20% more. So do I think that for that money, the $159, I think the Core Heavyweight is a great piece. I think people have been using grid fleece forever. I think it's one of the best all-around layers for dynamic insulation that you can use. And I particularly like this one. I've had other grid fleeces I've bought some from MEC, which is Canada's version of REI. Not all grid fleece is created equal. And I do think that Sitka's grid fleece is particularly good. But again, my own preference would be to go for the Sitka Ambient. All right, there you have it. My opinion on the Sitka Ambient Hoodie and the Core Heavyweight Hoodie from Sitka. As always, if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments section below. I'd be more than happy to get back to them. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.